budget qui est là. Donc je pense les étudiants seront bien formés dans le domaine des sciences et technologies et ils pourront à la suite de ces formations avoir de meilleurs emplois, ce qui va inciter d'autres à s'intéresser donc à la discipline des sciences et technologies.
The project has 4 expected outcomes. Outcome 1, effective utilization of information from labor market analysis, curriculum review, graduate tracer studies by higher education institutions to improve the delivery of technical education. Outcome 2, quality and relevance of the curriculum and programs improved in higher education institutions, which meets labor market demands, enhances inclusiveness, and promotes gender equality. Outcome 3, improved assessment methods adopted by higher education institutions to promote the competence-based training. Outcome 4, cooperation strengthened between higher education institutions and private sector stakeholders to inform labor market analysis, curriculum review, provision of work-based training opportunities, program development, assessment reform, and delivery of technical higher education. The CFIT project covers 6 countries: Côte d'Ivoire, Ethiopia, Gabon, Senegal, United Republic of Tanzania, and Uganda. Direct beneficiaries include higher education institutions as well as graduate students enrolled in higher technical education programs. Underpinning the CFIT project is a vision for inclusive, equitable, and prosperous societies. At the continental level, the project aims to add momentum to the African Union
Gentlemen, the session will start soon. Please take a seat. Good morning, dear friends. Welcome to the Third World Higher Education Conference. My name is Qingling, and I work in the section of higher education at UNESCO, coordinating the China Funds in Trust project in higher technical education in Africa. I believe this is the first session that you attend during the WEC 2022. All I have to say is good choice. In the coming 90 minutes or so, we will try our best to keep you awake. If you're jet-lagged, we will try not to disturb your sleep. So without further ado, I will start the session. First of all, please join me to welcome Ms. Maki Katsuno Hayashikawa, Director of the Division of Education 2030, to open the session. Maki, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Qinlin. Good. Well, good morning, everyone. Dear Ms. Xu Xiaoping, Council of the Permanent Delegation of China to UNESCO, dear distinguished participants, dear friends, good morning once again. Buenos dias. It's my great pleasure to welcome you all to this UNESCO World Higher Education Conference, especially today's first session. As Qinli was saying, very good choice to come here together for the first session of the conference on the youth skills development in Africa through higher technical education. Well, this session is being organized under the Chinese Funds in Trust project, number 3, Higher Technical Education in Africa for a Technical and Innovative Workforce. At the outset, I would like to take this opportunity to sincerely extend my gratitude to the People's Republic of China for its continuing support to this project. And I have a personal privilege to be associated with this project because I've been following the Chinese Fund in Trust from the very first project some years ago already. Well, despite the challenges brought by the COVID-19 pandemic, the past year has witnessed a successful completion of the formulation inception of the phase of the CFIT project. Here I applaud the CFIT team members for your collaborative spirit and unceasing engagement. Your dedication is what brings the project to its implementation today. And I see many of the faces who I understand is directly engaged in the project today. Well, youth, of course, a key word of this project is one of the greatest assets for Africa. And yet, urgent challenges also abound. The CFIT project targets these challenges, especially youth unemployment and underemployment on the African continent. The youth population on the continent is growing rapidly and is expected to double to over 830 million by 2050. The vibrant pool of workforce has enormous potential for inclusive and transforming economic growth in Africa. However, a stark reality of the youth unemployment issue undermines this aptitude. The 3 million formal jobs generated barely hold up the annual creation of 10 to 12 million African youth workforce. Every 24 hours, nearly 33,000 youth across Africa join the search for jobs, with nearly 2/3 of them left unemployed or marginally employed. Among them, of course, women face greater obstacles whose dilemmas become worse under the pandemic. At the heart of the issue lies a mismatch of skills. Notwithstanding the improved access to education over the past decades, many African graduates fail to land decent jobs because of the lack of skills expected by the labor sector. Imagine thousands and thousands of young graduates having invested considerable resources in higher technical educational institutions, only managed to end up upsetting job posts unrelated to their acquired knowledge and skills. Worse than this is being completely unemployed, which is still the reality encountered by many, many graduates. The skills mismatch in Africa's labor market is even compounded by the rapid ongoing digital transformations. Nowadays, digitized job posts demand new skill sets that have not been covered by education institutions. So even if you have the basic skills for digital applications, it may not be enough to get the most contemporary jobs available at the labor market. And this is really causing even greater disconnect between the skills of the workforce and expectations from the workforce. The situation is indeed regrettable, both for the individual and the society as a whole. It is urgent to equip the African youth with the right skills for employment. Education holds crucial answers to these challenges. Now, UNESCO attaches great importance and emphasis to education and has engaging in empowering youth in Africa through higher technical education. The CFIT project accords with UNESCO's global priority in Africa and its leadership in education. Devoted to tackling youth unemployment and underemployment, this project will approach the challenges at hand from several aspects. The goal is to strengthen the capacity of higher education institutions to fulfilling the skills demands in this digitized and globalized area. I believe that we will be hearing more in detail about the CFIT project, its purpose, what it has done, its aims, and some of the important aspects of the CFIT project that it's trying to address. But we know that it is trying to really look at strengthening university-industry connections through skills, and I think this is really the key core element of this project. Now, in the exploration of this new territory, we cherish a strong cooperating partnership. As partners from government agencies, private sectors, industry, and university join forces, our insights and capabilities can be substantially furthered. And it's a cross-board partnership that will be very important, that will become the vehicle for advancing the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Only together can we put our best foot forward, and so can the youth of Africa become empowered in our future. As the project steps into the next phase, I look forward to a fruitful implementation with a revitalized landscape of African youth employability. I wish you all a very successful session today that will bear many insights into this crucial effort about Africa's future generation, and of course, it is a future for all in this globe. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maki. And I did take down a line. I want to repeat it here. Only together can we put our best foot forward, and so can the youth of Africa become empowered. And that's why we bring everybody together today in this room and also across the screen. Hello from those online for this joint cause. And I want to second Maki for her gratitude to the People's Republic of China for supporting this project and this session. So I'm honored to welcome Ms. Yu Xiaoping, Counselor of the Chinese Permanent Delegation to UNESCO, to take the floor.
Thank you, Qingling. Ms. Maki Hayashikawa, Director of Division for Education 2030, dear national focal points, project coordinators, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's a great pleasure for me to join you today in this round table on youth skills development in African through higher technical education, sponsored by the China Founding Trust project on higher technical education in Africa. On behalf of the government of the People's Republic of China, I would like to warmly welcome all the participants from the project countries, namely Côte d'Ivoire, Gabon, Ethiopia, Senegal, Tanzania, and Uganda, as well as panelists and experts to this first in-person session since the launch of the CFIT 3 projects last October. I would like also to congratulate UNESCO Secretariat for its efforts to coordinate the implementation of the project in the past 2 years and amid this severe global health crisis. I believe this first gathering of the CFIT family will add further momentum to the next step of the project implementation while we are coming out of the global pandemic. China and Africa enjoy a time-honored history of close and friendly bilateral cooperation. This traditional good cooperation has extended to the multilateral forum in recent years. In 2011, the Chinese government signed an agreement with UNESCO to establish the China Founding Trust with the aim to support African countries in their efforts to promote education development. Since then, the China-African UNESCO tri-party cooperation has undergone 10 years of fruitful cooperation and resulted remarkable outcomes. The project has put a special emphasis on country ownership, synergy, and public-private partnership, and contributes positively to the South-South cooperation. In 2019, the CFIT project entered its third phase of implementation, focusing on enhancing the capacity of higher technical education institutions to respond to the skill needs of the labor market, the youth and adults, with a view to contributing to the implementation of the SDG goals and targets and the Global Priority African of UNESCO. Higher technical education has a close link with the socio-economic development of a country. A high-quality technical education system lays a good foundation for the industry development. It has also serves to create employment opportunities, helps to alleviate poverty, and bring a better life to the laborers and their families. Providing youth and adults with relevant skills, as well as entrepreneurial and innovative spirit, is of paramount importance to the sustainable development of humankind, in particular in the African continent, which has the youngest population of the world. We are pleased to see that since the launch of the CFIT 3, the project formulation and inception phase has been successfully completed, and concrete implementation of the whole project has started. I would like to take this opportunity to express gratitude to the UNESCO Secretariat, the national focal points, the project coordinators, the relevant regional offices, and other stakeholders for their hard work to lead this project forward despite the serious challenges brought by the pandemic. It is our sincere hope that this project will facilitate the development of a competence-based, employment-oriented, and flexible technical education model in the African continent, and make significant contribution to the educational, social, and economic development and of the project countries, and to the implementation of the 2030 development goals. During the course of the implementation, we would like to stress that the principle of country ownership shall continue to be the guiding principle throughout the whole implementation process, with the active involvement of professionals and enterprises in the project countries. We also encourage further communication and sharing of experiences and good practices among project countries, as well as with higher education institutions in China, with a view to mobilizing more partners and resources. The Chinese permanent delegation would like to reiterate its strong commitment to the implementation of this important tripartite cooperation project and to the Global Priority African of UNESCO through its continued support. Finally, I wish a fruitful discussion during the roundtable and look forward to working closely with you for a smooth implementation of CFIT 3 project. Thank you, and wish you a pleasant stay in Barcelona.
Thank you very much, Ms. Yu. Actually, as you mentioned, country ownership has been the guiding principle since the start of the project. I was saying that all the project countries, the national focal points, and institutional coordinators present here today are the drivers, and UNESCO is on the back seat or on the side seat to accompany you. So thank you so much for making it possible. And next up, I'm very happy to bring up our dear friend and a trusted partner of UNESCO, Dr. Roberta Bassett, the global lead for tertiary education and senior education specialist at the World Bank. And she has led operational teams implementing projects across a variety of tertiary and higher education projects, addressing issues including finance, quality assurance, internationalization of higher education, and of course, skills development. Now it's your turn.
Good morning, everybody. And thank you very much for attending this session today. I would like to extend my thanks to the UNESCO Secretariat and Qingling in particular for reaching out to me and asking me to participate today. It is an honor to represent the World Bank at this event. Thank you all for attending. Thank you to the Chinese delegation as well. So I've been asked to speak about sort of the more holistic environment in which this work is taking place because I'm not actively involved in this partnership. And so we do work quite extensively in Africa on issues of this type, and I'm very pleased to describe some of that to all of you today. As many of you may know, the objective of this particular exercise between the People's Republic of China and UNESCO is to enhance the capacity of higher education institutions to respond to skills needs. And this is a big issue as well for the World Bank across Africa. The initiatives here are ones that will transform the developmental potential of the countries across Africa. And their focus on outcomes like the relevance of skills and the broader benefits of higher education for social and economic development are also key considerations for the World Bank as we execute our projects and programs across Africa, which over the last 6 years have amounted to just over $4 billion of investments across the continent. So this is a major initiative. Of the $9 billion that we have invested in tertiary education globally, almost half is going to tertiary education in Africa. This is a big commitment on the bank's side to utilize tertiary education for sustainable development. I see a lot of friends in the room, so I'm very happy to see many of you here today. As many of you may know, about 8 months ago, the World Bank launched a new policy advisory framework for tertiary education called the STEER framework. And we chose the acronym STEER because we like the concept of steering. It's directional and it's very purposeful. And we encourage our clients to be that way when they look at their tertiary education systems and the kind of reforms that you need, to do that in a purposeful manner, a directional manner, because historically, a lot of tertiary education reforms have happened simply due to the evolution, natural, historic directions that have been developed. Now we're asking you to take a more purposeful look at what's happening on the ground and ensuring that post-secondary education is the resource that it's meant to be in your countries. In the STEER framework, the S stands for strategically diversified systems, and I will focus on that. The T is for technology, E is for equity, the other E is for efficiency, and R is for resilience. These are key drivers of what's happening in tertiary education globally, and we've created this framework so governments can look at their sectors and assess how they are doing under each of these points. The point today that we're talking about, higher technical education, is a key element of a strategically diversified system, and this is the point that I'm going to elaborate more. Many of you here, and myself included, are the products of elite research universities. We came through a system that developed us at a very high level through intense research-driven education. I'm very proud of this experience. I am the first in my family to have graduated from college, and so this experience changed the direction of my life, and I know that research universities play that role for millions of students. But they're only one form of tertiary education, and here we're talking about a different form of tertiary education, one that doesn't have to be so expensive, doesn't have to be so unwieldy, and driven by this nuance of research-driven. We're looking at higher technical education. Higher technical education can be much more focused on skills development, on meeting the needs of the expanded student population in an expanding massified environment. So there is no one-size-fits-all model for tertiary education. You all know this as well as anybody. And more countries are expanding their enrollments with students who have a divergent set of needs and expectations from their educational opportunities. They're not necessarily looking for this mind-blowing experience. They're looking for sure to get a job at the end with skills that are directly relevant to the labor market around them. Those students are just as deserving of a high-quality education as those that are seeking to head onto an academic track. And we are encouraging countries to think about the different university and institutional models that can serve the needs of that expanded and diverse population. Some students wish to explore academic subjects intensely, and others really want to have a specific outcome in mind that they can achieve with the tools given to them by their institution. An array of institutions with different missions and delivery modalities provide this menu of options that support student self-determination as much as possible, and this is something we hope to encourage in as many countries as possible. Higher technical education, with its focus on applied learning, skills development, and competencies relevant to the labor market, is a vital component of a diversified system. providing students with learning options that build skills in technical fields, often benefiting from collaboration directly with local industry. And you see this in parts of the world where auto plants are opened in a certain region, and then universities that provide the technical development specific to that auto plant's needs immediately start feeding an ecosystem that then builds regional development. And that is something worth encouraging in as many places as reasonably possible. The diversification concept is especially important in Africa, where demand for higher education continues to grow, but the traditional university education is unable to absorb this expanded demand. We see in the last 20 years, institutional enrollments have doubled across Africa. This is an incredible achievement to be proud of, but your institutions can no longer handle that. The traditional institutions can't do it. And there isn't the financing available from your national governments to open more and more institutions of the same caliber and kind that are in place. What are the new options? Higher technical learning is one of them. Also other options, including online learning or other modalities that can be explored through partnerships with the institutions that currently exist, should be considered. These complementary opportunities within the system to meet demand can promote expanded access and equity by opening up an array of options for continued learning. So we encourage countries to consider as many options as possible as they develop their sectors. But, and I wish to close my comments today with this important caveat, education is not enough. Education doesn't create jobs. Education creates educated people, skilled people, but you have to do this in an environment that is much more robust. Universities exist within an economic ecosystem and should not intently be held accountable or responsible for jobless graduates. That's not fundamentally what universities, even higher technical institutions do. They create skilled workers. The governance environment is incredibly important when you're looking at banking or taxation, immigration policies, just to name a few. Those are also contextual impacts that influence whether or not graduates get jobs, or how robust the private sector is, or how embracing the economy can be of skilled workers. So it all exists in a holistic environment that needs to be nurtured as a whole. Universities pay a big price for having to constantly defend themselves and how they produce their graduates, and they are very good at it in some contexts, but it's not entirely fair. And hopefully universities become a partner in that dialogue about the full ecosystem so that there is more collaboration on what is needed outside the institutions to allow for this employment ecosystem to be more robust for youth and graduates. This panel today, which will elaborate the experiences of students and staff and decision makers in higher technical education to showcase what has worked and some key challenges that remain, is a great opportunity for all of us to learn from this experience, and I look forward to it myself. I join all of you in looking forward to learning from these great speakers today. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Roberta. I think you said the word. Skills development for youth is not just the responsibility of universities. It's also about industry, the government, and various other stakeholders working together. So one focus of the panel discussion today is really about how we build this ecosystem and bring everybody together to work towards this common goal for the social and economic development. So now I'm going to be very generous, not just inviting one speaker. I'm going to invite 4 panelists to take their seat in the front. Joining us today, we have Ms. Dorothy Okello, Dean of the School of Engineering from Makuru University of Uganda, Mr. Olivier Sagna, Director of Studies and Cooperation at the Ministry of Higher Education, Research and Innovation of Senegal. You can take your seat as I read your name and bring your name tag. Thank you. And Mr. Chukwemeka Nwangli, a Rhodes Scholar and PhD student in Engineering Sciences from the University of Oxford. And we have Mr. Ahmed Bawa, Chief Executive Officer of the Universities South Africa. Please take a seat and we'll start the panel. And technically, could you make sure that your microphone is on? Okay. So, can you hear me? Okay. So I believe the reason why you're here today is either you believe in youth skills development or you have doubt about it, about the way towards it. So today we're very honored to have perspectives from the youth, from universities, from policymakers, and Emeka is also representing employer because he has his own startup. And also we have from association, and Professor Bawa actually is a versatile man. Later I will introduce him. So in the center of the conversation today is youth. We have a very young panel today, but I will start from the youngest, Emeka. So Emeka is now pursuing his studies in engineering sciences, PhD at the University of Oxford. He's passionate about energy transitions and co-founded the Greenish Technologies in Nigeria, a company deploying smart technologies for reliable, clean energy to those lacking access to energy in the local context. He's also vice president of the Africa-Oxford Society, where he provides professional and academic support to students back in Africa. So Emeka, could you tell us a bit more about your higher technical education experience? How did you leverage the whole system to start your startup? And what kind of knowledge, support, and skills did you get from your university? And if you identify any gaps in the process? Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for having me and for being part of this very wonderful panel. I would like to say that my technical education has kind of two phases. So one phase of it was the phase of when I was back home in Nigeria studying electrical engineering, and then the second phase is now at the University of Oxford. So I'll try to do a bit of a comparison between the two. So in terms of the kind of experiences I had or the things that I witnessed during the 5 years of study at the University of Nigeria, one thing that was kind of very, very evident and clear to me was the fact that the university system tended to be a bit not abreast with the current challenges of the society. So it's kind of like we were always being taught about theories, things that are very, very electrical in nature, but then none of it was directly channeled towards addressing the problem of electricity access and climate change on the continent. So that, for me, was kind of one of the major problems. Then the second issue that I kind of experienced was also the lack of proper educational infrastructure. And now that is going to tie into something that Roberta said about the budget. So to give very good context, Nigeria, which is supposed to be Africa's largest country, allocates only 5% of its annual budget to education. So in 2021, that amounted to just about $1.8 billion. Nigeria has 45 federal government universities, hundreds of secondary schools, thousands of primary schools, all benefiting from this budget. And again, for context, the University of Harvard spent $5.2 billion last year on its annual budget. So you have $1.8 billion for a country and $5.2 billion for one university. So it's kind of very, very difficult for me to grasp. So the direct implication of this was the fact that we had very little funding for experiments. You couldn't, visualize any major experiments to carry out. When I was doing my final year project on how to use artificial neural networks to improve the grids, there was very little funding. So it ended up being more kind of written work and nothing necessarily strong to back it up. So as a result of, again, this lack of budget, you have kind of a vicious cycle where the system trains a bit less qualified people, and then those less qualified people start training more people, and then you have less equipment again, and then so it keeps getting worse and worse. While I was in uni, one thing is that I identified a very major problem, and then that problem for me was the fact that we lacked access to electricity, and I experienced this in a kind of very, very difficult way because my dad owned a business that relied almost entirely on electricity. So at any time when there was power blackout, it affects the economy of the family. And so when you watch on the news that there's economic challenge, I could see family economic challenge directly. So I was like, I need to find a way to solve this problem. And then in uni, which is one of the very wonderful things I kind of found in African universities, is that you have a very large, young and skilled population. And that's very, very good because these people are extremely very ambitious. And so I met a lot of like minds that were bringing different innovative ideas. And then through them, we decided to start off a company called Greenish Technologies. Because the university lacked some of the necessary equipment to help us build this, we asked them for a space. And I mean, we are very grateful they gave us a reasonable space to accommodate ourselves, but then we had to fund buying the equipment that we needed, buying the raw materials that we needed, and then we started building our products. And by the time we finished, then we started actually, marketing and selling some of these products. So this was kind of pretty much the things that we did to make sure that we kind of crossed that stage. So we have theoretical knowledge, but then for us to actually implement that, we had to now, because we found value in the system, as opposed to just crying about the challenges, we had to think of a way to harness that value, as a team working together.
It's a really an extraordinary story where we can see the point lacking and also the spirit of entrepreneurship and how this can empower the youth to help the local issues. And after Emeka, I want to turn to Dr. Dorothy Okello. You actually both did the same studies in electrical engineering. And now Dorothy is the Dean of the School of Engineering from Makuru University of Uganda, our CFIT institutional focal point. And she's holding many titles. Thank you. Hello? I need more technical training. Yeah, this is working. So she's also holding many titles, including Director of Innovation, Resilient Africa Network of 18 universities. And she's also member of the Uganda Institution of Professional Engineers, institutional coordinator of our project. And I want to turn to Dorothy to ask you about what kind of university-industry collaborations do you have at your university or across Uganda, if you wish, to support students like Emeka? And what kind of support do you see from the industry and the government that could help the university to create the ecosystem that works for all?
All right. Good morning. Is my mic on? It's also not on, right? Okay. All right. Okay, double guarantee, and for the people online. So good morning. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this panel. I don't take that for granted because we're not the only institution in this space. Emeka has set a very good stage for the kind of experiences that we have, because what he has shared is what is common with a number of our universities. And so as a result of the infrastructure that we have, and I really should give kudos as well to Roberta and their team, because the Africa Centers of Excellence are doing a lot of work to turn that around, but that is in certain spaces. You find that the students are having more of, yes, the theoretical part, and that we ace it. And the reason we ace it is because they go to Oxford and do very well. So we have there's no problem with the theoretical part. We're on par. The thing is, after that, then they do a lot of simulation because we lack the equipment. And when you're doing simulation, you're doing a lot of assumptions, right? So you come out, you've simulated this thing, it works, but in simulation, right? So this is what now brings us to the industry linkage and why that is important. Because with that, they can actually go out into the field and either from the areas of interest or just understanding what are the key areas of interest for industry and see how that gets to get the practical hands-on that we have. And that's why for us, it's really, really big in terms of trying to strengthen the academia-industry linkages. And before the CFIT project, we had another project with the Royal Academy of Engineering. And so by the time CFIT came in, it found us really ready to grow from that point. And what we had is a 2-week exchange. So 2 weeks, we have Industry 4, come over to the university, give seminars, teach, review our curricula. And then 2 weeks, we have our faculty technicians go out into industry. So usually you have the students going out, but this time it will be the faculty and our technical team going out into industry and understanding what is out there, all for a view of trying to understand where could be the gaps, right? So CFIT, as I said, found us in a really good position because we wanted to say, okay, how do we take it from there? I mean, 2 weeks is good, but there's only so much you can do in 2 weeks. So what we're doing now with the CFIT project is, one, we're conducting a labor market analysis, which is a more comprehensive study. And should I add, it's also bringing further collaboration with us at the university because the School of Engineering is largely going to be collaborating with the School of Economics to understand this. and really get a better picture and a more comprehensive view in terms of what are the gaps out there in terms of when our students go there. Because it's also true that when they go into engineering, and we just had a discussion with Roberta about it, a big section of them will actually not end up in engineering. And I think your counselor spoke to that, and also the speaker before, that we have underemployment or unemployment. Yeah, so we want to have a better picture around what that is. And also doing a graduate tracer study to really see where are these people and what is it about their experiences, why didn't they end up in engineering and all. And you mentioned that I've also been, well, I'm an active member because we do have to be registered, if you will, okay, to practice professionally, of the Institution of Professional Engineers. And again, that is another opportunity for us to really look into the engineering space and see why is it that the engineering sector in Uganda is not delivering to the expectations that we have. So all of this brings us closer and closer to the industry for us to appreciate where the gaps are and what role we can play as the university. Because I think, and this also came through from the speakers, that you really need to look at this issue as an ecosystem. Otherwise, you're going to keep saying that the university is not producing the graduates that are fit for you. And I think when this was being shared, I'm like, oh, the first conference, I don't have to defend myself about that, because that's very key for us to understand which are the bits. So some of the initiatives that we're taking, as I said, inviting industry to come and to the university. Already when we do curriculum review, and which we also hope the labor market analysis and the graduate stage are going to feed into more substantially, whenever we're doing curriculum review, we bring them to us to be part of that process. They are who we engage. But okay, maybe it's not as deep as it could be. But that understanding needs to be there so that we understand the role of each of us and what it is. Government also has a key role they can play. Because in Uganda, and I'm sure it's the same with many other places, we are very private sector led in terms of how economies are growing. What we're pushing back on government is that among the very many tax incentives that they give to investors and things like that, they give land, they give this and that, they can actually give maybe like, for example, tax rebates or tax incentives based on the number of graduate students or students in training that you take on for internship placement and everything. Because now, and COVID really made us have a big challenge because a number of places, of course, were scaling back, if not shutting down, right? So you find the big companies which maybe used to take 30 students. You know, so we have only space for one. Then you're like, okay, where are the 29 others going to go? And Makerere is not the only one producing engineers. So these are some of the challenges that we have to help the sector appreciate that it's not only the part that we do, but there's the role for industry and that there's role for government, so that if we three work together, we can work very strongly to address the issue of underemployment and also unemployment, because I think Emeka also gave a very good example, which I tend to challenge our students with. We're training engineers, we're engineers ourselves, and whenever they go home for Christmas, even the first-year students will gladly respond to being called an engineer. I'm like, okay, beyond being called an engineer, how does your community feel you being an engineer? How do you come up, leave these problems, because you're living them. How do you come up with solutions, even at a small, basic, rudimentary scale to, to solve those problems so that we can rightly claim the name we have, at least as the College of Engineering, that we are the home of innovation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dorothy. I think you end on a very important point. We're talking about youth skills development, but what kind of skills? Are we only talking about technical skills or the soft skills, the care for the community, and how you discover and solve problems, how you communicate with others, and how you set up your own startup and monitor your team? So next up, I want to extend on Dorothy's point on the importance of policy support. We're very lucky here to have Professor Olivier Sagna. He's the Director of Studies and Cooperation at the Ministry of Higher Education, Research and Innovation of Senegal. And he's also the national focal point of the CFIT project in Senegal, a full professor of Information and Communication Sciences at the Cheikh Anta Diop University of Dakar. His research focuses on the use of information and communication technologies in higher education, as well as ICT-related public policies. So, Professor Sagna, we know the National Development Plan of Senegal, Emerging Senegal, and In part of the work plan and national development plan, the youth skills development and human capital development is a core part of it for the national development. I want you to share with us the policy initiatives in Senegal that supports graduate employability, and what do you see are the policy enablers to create this ecosystem for the students, universities, and industry? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. I'm very pleased to be here with us this morning, invited by the CFIT project. So as nobody is perfect, I am not an electrical engineer by training, as Queen Ling. I am an historian by training, and the second point is I am going to speak in French, so you have to take your headset if you want to understand what I'm going to say.
Well, now it's been about 10 years that the Senegalese government has been implementing the plan called Sénégal Émergent, looking towards 2035. And we are working on a significant series of reforms in higher education. Overall, the objectives of this reform is, one, to increase access to higher education. So we want to meet the demand to access higher education. Secondly, improve the quality of higher education. Quality hadn't been a concern, and this aims to improve the employability of people who are leaving our higher education system. And this is in order to increase the professional insertion of those who earn degrees. So this has to do with the quality of the training of those earning degrees, and it's not the universities themselves that generate jobs, so this is a very important point. We need to take stock. So we need to work on the quality and content of the training. Now, overall, in this vast situation that we've had over the last 12 years, we've generated a National Authority of Quality Assurance in charge of accrediting higher education and also programs. This is an important step. And the major stream in the reform is professionalization of the studies in higher educations. We have traditional universities that train doctors in sociology, history, science, what have you. But the current society has other demands on the labor market. And so we need to professionalize this. We have generated degree programs in addition to the traditional programs, and we've also diversified higher education in order to generate higher education in a 2-year session, 2 years after the baccalaureate, and then we have 50% done within the university's walls, and also 50% out in farming and businesses and services and so forth. Another important dimension of this reform is also to work on implementing a skills-based approach aimed at training, working with the private sector. Training that is generated meets the demands of the private sector, and we don't just look at brilliant teachers in their offices thinking about the curricula. So training needs to meet needs, and from the outset, we have the private sector in defining the skills that people need. People who will be trained. And when we provide teaching, we have at least 30% of teaching staff who are actually professionals out there in the real world and share their knowledge. And it's also important that people in the private sector be involved in evaluating this training. So the implementation of the skills-based approach is a very important aspect, and we also need dialogue so that people understand that if the private sector wants certain skills, then they need to allow the students to do internships. So that is dialogue that is sometimes not easy. There are constraints. There are people that need that type of training. So, as we said, we're not only talking about higher education churning out degree holders, but we need to churn out people who are going to generate businesses and resources, and we need to promote an entrepreneurial makeup or class of people who leave our universities. Even if they're well trained, if they have ideas in terms of entrepreneuring, they need to be reinforced in terms of their skills. We need to work on financing. We need to use other elements in the ecosystem to address this. So these are overall the elements that the Senegalese authorities are implementing in order to have technical and vocational training and professional training be more geared towards the job market, having people employable. And hopefully the jobs will be out there. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Sagna, particularly talking about quality assurance and the engagement between universities and the private sector.
Full language, we're coming back to English, and I'm going to invite you to South Africa. Now we have Professor Ahmed Bawa. He's a very versatile man. I've been waiting for this moment to turn to him. He's the CEO of the University South Africa. Is an association of a group of public universities in South Africa. He's a theoretical physicist, an inaugural member of the South Africa National Academy Council on Innovation, a fellow of the Academy of Sciences of South Africa. Until 2016, he was vice chancellor and principal of the Durban University of Technology. He also served on the national policy development teams in the area of science and technology and higher education. So, Professor Bawa, with your many roles as physicist, policymaker, and now leading the University South Africa, I'm going to start with a very big generalist question. What do you see are the enablers or barriers for the multi-stakeholders to come together and work for youth skills development? Thank you. And as a specialist, maybe you can also share with us what the University South Africa has been doing in this arena. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jingling. And is it working, or should I use the mic? Yeah. It's working. Yeah. Thank you so much, Jingling, and thank you for this invitation, and thank you for putting me amongst these wonderful group of panelists here. And Dr. Bassett, thank you for your input as well. I think that the imagination of the transition we had in 1994, has really collapsed in South Africa. I mean, in some respects, all the euphoria we had, post 1994, that we would be heading into a society which was, democratic, of course, but also more equal, more socially developed, and so on. Much of that has really fallen by the wayside, and so over the last 5-6 years, that we've really been going through a process of reimagining, if you like, in some respects, that social compact that we had in 1994 has really collapsed, and in particular, we noticed that with the massive student uprisings of 2015 to 2017, and it has forced us to really go back to the drawing board and to reimagine just what this transition means for us. And it seems to me, at least, that, and I'm sure that this applies to other countries as well on the continent, that when we think about this, when we think about reimagining the skills sector or the skills development sector, there are two driving imperatives. The first one is clearly the issue around social justice. It's about saying we have an youth unemployment now in South Africa of something like 60%, 60 to 70%. So the social justice parameters are clear, that we really have to address, the access to skills development programs, access to the labor market and so on in a way that's kind of really put on kind of steroids, if you like. But as Dr. Bassett indicated, this is clearly not the solution. The solution is really something that's in the ecosystem, which includes the economy and so on. But at the same time, universities and colleges and so on have a role to play, and they must play that role to ensure that young people can get access to the labor market. And clearly, what we do have in South Africa is a growing participation in higher education and in post-school education more generally of young people from poor and working class backgrounds. But of course, that's meaningless without a growth in the economy and the absorption of those young people in the economy. The second imperative, as we've heard already, is really the vast changes that are taking place in the labor market, and to ensure that that addressing the skills agenda takes into account the those vast changes that are taking place. And I think that it's not just about the technology, but it's also about changes in the modes of production, changes in just to give you one example, the huge shifts from carbon economies to non-carbon economies, all of that are not simply technology-based. There are vast changes taking place in modes of production, and we have to take into account those changes. So I'll just make a few points, which are not new, and many people have spoken about them already. That's nice about being last on the panel. But the one thing that we've done in South Africa, which is really startling when you think about it, is that we've drawn a very strict kind of division between what we think of as the skills sector and we think of as the education sector. The kind of and so I really like this term, the what did you call it? High technical education, I think you call it. Yeah. So this idea of really saying that we have to reimagine this relationship between cognitive learning and skills development. And just a very simple point about this is that if you become a particle physicist, a theoretical particle physicist like me, you have to develop your skills all the way through. Because it's not just about writing down equations, it's about saying, well, once you've got equations, then you have to manipulate those equations, you have to produce numbers and so on, and those require skills, right? So this is not something that happens in one sector and doesn't happen in the other sector. It really happens throughout the sector, and we have to keep that in mind. I think it's a very important point to keep in mind. Because otherwise, what you do is you have students who enter sort of a system which bifurcates, people go into the skill sector and some people go into, it's a very dangerous kind of, and of course leads to higher levels of of social fragmentation, if you like. So that is the one point. The second point is that, and as has been spoken about already, there hasn't been a time when there's a need. Okay. There hasn't been a time when there's been a need for much higher levels of co-creation between employers and universities. So that this is really the time now for us to find very systemic ways of ensuring that the collaboration between employers and institutions of learning come together. And later in discussion, maybe I can share some of that about what's going on in South Africa. And in particular, of course, this isn't a one-way. This isn't one way. This isn't just from the employment sector to the universities, because there's a tremendous amount of disruption and so on taking place in the universities, which need to feed into the economy. So it really has to be a co-created situation. The third point I'd like to make is that we have to think about, in the post-school education and training sector, we have to think more and more about differentiation, but ensuring that that differentiation has really solid articulation pathways, that young people aren't kind of led into one kind of sector and then find it almost impossible to kind of come back into the other sector and so on. So the idea is really to try and ensure that the college sector, the TVT sector, the vocational sector, and the higher education sector are articulated with each other. But that there's also differentiation, that we don't get universities beginning to do what the TVT sector does for money-making purposes. That's a very big issue in many parts of the world. The fourth point I'd like to make is, for some reason which is quite inexplicable to me, what we've done is we've also separated out kind of learning in theory and learning in practice. And it seems to me that in all of our programs, we have to move increasingly towards ensuring that young people are working at the theory-practice nexus, if you like, that there's an opportunity for young people to do that. I mean, where that happens, like in medicine, for example, or in some parts of engineering at Durban University of Technology, where I was, students had to spend 1 year in industry before graduating. Where that happens, it's excellent. There's very good outcomes. But for most of our programs, we don't have that anymore. So teaching and learning at that theory-practice nexus seems to me to be fundamental. The fifth point is, it seems to me that we have to remove the initial training skills programs, initial higher education programs. We have to remove them from the paywall, from behind the paywall. We have to ensure access, especially to poor and working class young people. That there isn't, and of course in 2015, between 2015 and 2017, the South African higher education system really fell to its knees. I mean, it really came to a grinding halt, largely because of this issue. And of course, there have been significant changes now. And I think, as Professor Sanya sort of indicated, I think there's this idea of really beginning to inculcate in our young people sort of the ability to think entrepreneurially is critical. I'm not saying that everybody is going to become entrepreneur. I mean, I'm never going to become an entrepreneur, but the idea of trying to ensure that every young person develops the skill to engage in entrepreneurial thinking is critical, because it seems to me that that's very linked to innovation. So that cycle, if you like, is and we can talk about that again a little later on. One of my deepest concerns at the moment, of course, is just, for over the last 10 to 15 years, over the last 10 years, say, is what we are seeing, this kind of dramatic fragmentation in the world, due to the shifting geopolitics. And I think that has enormous consequences, in particular for our continent, has enormous consequences for the future. That it seems to me that we really have to, as a world, begin to think more concretely about how to reestablish a kind of well, I don't know about re-establish, but establish a global commons of teaching, learning, skills development, and so on. And finally, it's the issue around basic education and thinking more about how basic education, it's not just about higher education, it's also about trying to understand how basic education feeds into the post-school system. Qingling, I've been watching your glass of water. So.
I have a few here. If I drink the water, that means I mess up.
Thank you so much. I stopped there. Thank you.
But I have to say that the speech, the many points, is worth the waiting and worth me not drinking the water to stop him. So there are 2 points that I get from the many points that I found very impressive. First one is about the diverse and flexible pathways that we should provide to the youth, to the adults. There are those in universities, but there are also those outside of a campus that want to upskill and reskill. So how do they come back? So quality assurance, recognition, diverse pathways, because universities of today and universities of tomorrow will differ. If we still think the learning will happen behind closed walls, that means lack of access. That also means we're not keeping up with the technological changes that changes the nature of learning. So thank you for this point. And also another point I get to is bidirectional or multi-directional. As with the discussion today, the direction is not just from the panelists to you, but also from you to the panelists. Now I'm going to open the floor for questions and answers. We have about 10 minutes. Maybe you'll allow about 3 to 4 questions. If you have a question, please hands up in the air, and then my colleague will run to you with the microphone. Please, Professor. Please briefly introduce yourself if you could. And
yes,
then,
I'm Tor Halvorsen from the University of Bergen, Norway, on the west coast of Norway. And I'm here in connection primarily with this launching of the Knowledge-Driven Action UNESCO report, Knowledge-Driven Action, Transforming Higher Education for Global Sustainability, which will be launched tomorrow morning. We also have a side event today at 6 o'clock for those who are interested. My question is really, the engineering profession is tremendously important. And in this report, we see how the engineering profession is a key condition for transforming the way we produce and consume. So my question is, how do you think this transition in knowledge for sustainable development will affect your thinking about the role of the engineering profession? And my second question is, all of the presenters seems to talk about universities, but still skills and practice and linkages to the industries and so on and so forth. So where is the vocational education that was creating the industrial wonder of Germany once upon a time, or in Scandinavian countries? How do you differ between vocational education and university-based education? In Uganda, they once talked about Makerere becoming a glorified high school, since it had to take all kinds of students in for fee-paying purposes. And the university conflict between the university as a general education or a professional, higher professional education institution and the learning of skills was very acute. And it seems to be the case also in Nigeria, and in South Africa we now hear this is acute. I mean, if you go to Stellenbosch, they talk about the fourth industrial revolution and how to produce the high-level technicians. If you go outside of Stellenbosch, 1 kilometer, you find 50% of the young people without schooling. So these are my 2 questions.
Thank you very much. And we'll take several questions in a row, please, over there. And then 3 more questions here, and then we'll close the floor. Please.
I am not going to ask a question. I'm going to make a comment, if that's okay.
Thank you. Yes.
I am Dr. Do Pascal. I am an associate professor of higher education management in Finland. I am heading an organization called Diaspora Academic Network for Africa, which seizes the opportunity of the digital revolution to get African academics in the diaspora support African higher education systems. So I'm going to comment. I get a little bit concerned that we talk so much about policies. I was very happy when I saw a recent World Bank project launch to think about teacher quality. But I'm going to talk more as somebody who lives in Finland, where I am, and which is often talked of like one of the best higher education systems in the world. I just want to give a key word that one of the greatest stimulus to responsive higher education from the way I see in Finland is the environment. It goes by teaching the child how to imagine based on the environment, and it goes by also changing the system structurally, the way I heard our World Bank representative talking about, like differentiating to respond to the environment. Sometimes I think South Africa has progressed very much in even mergers and diversification. The third aspect I wanted to comment about why you say Finland is, it's often said, everything is evidence-based. Like, they do a lot of research about their systems. We once developed a program to train higher education administrators in Africa, which didn't go well. The last point comes from our colleague from South Africa. It seems to me to be a blind spot now that a perfect holistic higher education can become perfect by getting universities support the secondary and primary sector. This looks to me, because when I look at it in Finland, you have universities have a strong hand on even primary higher education. So it makes the whole system develops holistically. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We have 3 questions, and I invite you to keep your questions short if you can. Thank you. And okay, we start from there.
Hello, thank you so much, Cheng-Ling and the entire CFIT team for giving us the opportunity to impact Africa. My questions are 2. First of all, I would like to acknowledge that the issue of youth skilling is a holistic idea that should be systematic from the beginning. So I would like to know from the experience of other countries how that holistic revamping of the education system is taking place, because we cannot tackle it from one level, which is higher education. What is happening across the other sections of education, like primary or pre-primary, because this has to be a systematic revolution, from my understanding. Number 2 is the issue of policy framework, because we cannot be successful if the policies are not well integrated, especially the regulatory bodies. Like in Uganda, we have the National Council for Higher Education, which is mandated to coordinate all these institutions. We have also the other regulatory bodies that are regulating the other vocational institutions. So how is that link between the universities and the policy framework in achieving this agenda? I'm Dr. Medad Twinamasko from Uganda, and I'm the institutional coordinator for the CFIT project. I'm also the acting director of innovations and technology transfer in the university. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Medard. And we have a question back here and here. And then we'll move on to the answers.
Thank you very much. I am glad to be in this session. Yes, skills development is a very, very important issue. From your experience, what is the role of quality assurance mechanism in the program you are engaged in? I am asking this question because I believe that if we do not take into account establishment of consistent mechanism for quality assurance to promote culture of quality, in all stakeholders engaged in those processes, we will fail again. Because we fail if people are not oriented to the results, if people are not oriented to ensure that all what they are doing must be oriented by quality, must be oriented to quality. So please comment on this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. I am Ana Nyampule. I am from Universidade Joaquim Chissano in Mozambique. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna. And we have a question here from Renato. Here, last one.
Thank you so much. My name is Renato Perti. I'm senior expert at the International Bureau of Education, IB UNESCO. Just to make one very short comment. First of all, congratulations for the panel. It has been fantastic to listen to all of you and to the comments from different colleagues. We believe that this is a little bit more complex than we are seeing today. In terms that it's not only an adjustment to the work, to the labor market, it's about seeing the curricula as much formal looking and futuristic. I'm quite skeptical about thinking that this is about adjusting education to the labor market. It's much complex, the discussion. Mm-hmm. And this discussion, from our perspective in UNESCO, is much more about integrating pieces than disconnecting. It's not talking more about hard soft skills. All skills are relevant. It's not about talking about theory and practice as disconnected. It's not about disciplines as separate silos. So we have to find a way of a new way of understanding education. And that implies revamping holistically and systemically the curricula, connecting pieces and not separating pieces. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Renato. Unfortunately, we have to close the floor, but you have chances in the coming 3 days to talk to our panel in person, in depth. Concerning the time, I'm going to give you a very difficult task. Keep your answer within 1 minute. And I'm going to give the first question about engineering professional transition to Dorothy. The question about how do you bring the whole system together, policy, institution, to Professor Sania, and the one on quality assurance to Professor Bawa, and the one on curriculum to Emeka. Thank you.
All right. I think the short answer in terms of how we relate with the Sustainable Development Goals, and just looking at it from the perspective of Makerere, typically our students come into engineering because they are the best in the country. We compete with medicine. But you did well in school and you ended up in engineering. It also explains why we also have a very high dropout, right? So one of the things that we have to really do is make engineering relevant, okay, beyond it being the thing you do if you're the best in math and all. And so linking it to the National Development Program, where if you look at it, the priorities are for engineering, running projects and programs which make the students look at the Sustainable Development Goals. So if you're doing a project, you have to also indicate to which SDGs is your work related to. So building that culture that we're thinking about what it is we're doing within the framework of the SDGs is one of the initiatives that we have undertaken. And I really do want also to give kudos here to our partners, in particular the Royal Academy of Engineering, which has supported us in this endeavor. We need to upscale it, make it more inbuilt into the way we work, but really that is, I would say, a 1 minute answer to what I could do on this question. Thank you.
Bien, donc même exercice difficile, je crois que tout le monde l'a dit.
Well, the same rather difficult exercise. Unfortunately, technically, information, education systems and ministry that are revolve for primary schooling, middle schools, high schools, and then for higher education. And very often what we see around the place is that there is a lack of dialogue, a lack of coordination, a lack of synergies between these different levels, these different silos, if you like. And that's the real challenge from a policy point of view, as the colleague has said with the description of the experience in Finland, we can see, even when we talk about primary education, we need to involve higher education, which is going to be involved in, very often training the teachers who are going to be involved in these schools. And that's the real challenge. It's also the challenge vis-à-vis this issue of technical teaching and vocational training, for it not to be done as sort of default teaching for kids who failed different levels of education before they get to university. So at all the different stages through the sector, all the different levels, there has to be a possibility to properly articulate these early training with technical training, academic training, so that people can choose one path or another and then come back to a different path if they so wish. So this chance to have a vocational training, so you're not then sort of imprisoned in that for life. You're not trapped in one area. You can change paths. At university, you can choose to look to more classical studies, and these, if you like, these passerelle that can join, the one area to another.
Challenge, start.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to first identify that one of the biggest problems, like we mentioned earlier, is the fact that I think the universities are just trying to play catch-up the whole time. So it's always like we're trying to catch up with what the system is, as opposed to trying to be as futuristic as possible with the curriculum. I think one thing that can be done is, and I'm very happy that we have policymakers and educationists here and finance people here, is to see how we can work together with like the private sector to really redesign this curriculum. When I was a kid, my dad used to tell me that until African universities begin to devise ways of solving our local problems, we will continue playing second fiddle. And I think the local problems today are beginning to change. There are now, very interesting innovations in education tech, which can actually open access to education to as many people as possible. There are innovations in fintech and all of this, and some of these things can actually be very simple, collaborations between industry and academia. And then that way, when the students are graduating from these universities, they're able to really feed into these industries directly. And the good side of this is that there's economic advantages to both parties. So if the industry understands the actual, economic benefit of doing these things, and the academia also understands the benefit, I think it will create this kind of cross-party relationship and this very nice mutualistic arrangements between them. And I have to say that it's very nice what CFIT is trying to do, and I think it will be nice for us to take this to the next level of really ensuring that the curriculums are redesigned to solve Africa's problems. We have a lot of systemic or institutional issues, but some of them can actually be addressed using innovation in all of these various sectors that have been identified. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Professor Bawa.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. On the quality side, I think that the challenge we have, South Africa, we have a very sophisticated quality system, but it's also problematic because it's also kind of puts things into boxes, it prevents articulation and so on. So we have a high education sub-framework qualifications then we have a skills one and so on, and they don't speak to each other. They belong to different structures, different governmental structures, and so I don't think it's enough just to have the policies and so on. The big question is, just how do you ensure that there's a direct kind of articulation between what's required in the labor market and what's required, what's being done, in our education system. So I think that's a very good conversation to have. If you don't mind, I'd like to respond to. I think there are some fantastic experiments going on right now. If you look at education, medical education in South Africa has shifted dramatically. It used to be physics, chemistry, and so on. Then it used to be anatomy, physiology. All that is gone. Now it's very much kind of linked to context, linked to what students are facing. And I think the big challenge for us, the biggest challenge for us, is to understand how to shift our curricula, not from a theoretical point of view, but from from the theory practice nexus, if you like, just kind of really saying, what is the context? Universities are located in a place, and they have to locate their curriculum kind of exercises in that place. That doesn't mean that they don't articulate with the global knowledge system, you know, but they enter that global knowledge system on the basis that they are locally contextualized. And I think that that's the big challenge for us, I think.
Thank you very much for all these rich discussions. And at the very last, I want to introduce you. You know that behind every initiative, there are many pillars. We have the pillars sitting in this room today. And there's another important pillar, Mr. Peter Wells, behind the start of the initiative and supporting of this initiative throughout the way. And I'd like to welcome to give us the closing remark and a sum up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jingling, for that rather dubious introduction there. But thank you so much. And I really didn't want to take up too much time, but because these discussions, the questions raised, the ideas, the innovation here is just so powerful and innovative, and the future. And so I really don't want to deflect from these comments, but I can just say that I personally was very inspired by what I heard here today, this morning amongst you. Insightful discussions, which makes this wrapping up task really difficult. But the fact that we are all here represents a common vision on youth empowerment. Our youth today have to navigate a world that is increasingly complex, uncertain, and of course undergoing rapid technological changes. Skills development and higher education is an effective approach to enable individual growth and further national development. Strengthening technical higher education and fostering links between institutions and labour markets will serve to upgrade professional skills profiles of the youth, improve employability, and foster entrepreneurship. From this discussion alone, we understand that if the demographic transition in Africa is supported by effective measures for youth training and employment, through both public policy, university efforts, private sector involvement, it will be an incredible opportunity for development and a major leap forward for the region. Today, we were delighted to hear from practitioners and experts from the panel and also from the questions and comments raised from the audience. Amika's story in pursuing higher technical education and setting up his own company in sustainable energy exemplified the aspiration and potential of youth, not only in Africa, but in other regions of the world today. We can also be positive about how promising the future could be if youth are given the opportunity to grow, to apply those skills, and to live their own visions for the future. We also heard excellent ideas from Dr. Okello. Her practical insights into leveraging ICTs for skills training and potential means of enhancing university-industry collaboration is illuminating, again, not only for Africa, but for other regions of the world. Professor Oliver Sanger, in the same vein, inspired us with the view on enhancing graduate employability from the policy perspective. We need scaled-up initiative policies today to support youth in acquiring new skills, ushered in by the fourth industrial revolution, as illustrated by Professor Bawa. Empowering the youth through skills development in higher technical education is key to turning challenges into opportunities. It requires efforts to better support the transition from school to work, with incentives to companies and public-private partnerships. In this regard, we need to work together to commit ourselves to build more inclusive and equitable societies that enable young men and women to pursue their aspirations. Partnership is the key. It is our compass in navigating the new landscape of higher technical ed. There is a shared responsibility across government agencies, private sector, universities, youth movements for youth empowerment. Finally, please allow me to once again thank the panelists and the participants and your contributions from the floor. I hope you get some key takeaways from this session that will not only deepen your thoughts on youth skills development, but also inspire efforts for the future. Thank thank you very much again to the panelists, to the floor. I wish you all a good conference. I hope you use this opportunity to not only learn more, but meet more. From the comments I've heard so far already this morning, during registration and coffee, everybody was very pleased with the content and the sessions and the diversity of the conference, but most important of all, they just wanted to see each other in person and speak after 2 years of Zooming. So please use this opportunity and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Peter, and thank you to all of you joining us today in the room and online. And I just have a final advertisement to make. If you're interested in skills development, on the third day, 20th of May in the morning, there will be another panel on TVET, as you mentioned, higher technical education and youth in Africa. And one of our focal point from CFIT, Dr. Medard, will be speaking at that session. I'm glad we found each other. If you're interested in this topic, come and talk to us. Thank you. And now auditorium for the plenary. At 12 o'clock, you can move to the auditorium, the biggest, beautiful room, for the opening. Thank you.